My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 43 years old. 3 months ago, my entire family laughed at me in a lawyer's office. Not chuckled, not smiled, laughed. The kind of laughter that fills a room when everyone believes they're watching someone else's life fall apart. My brother nearly spilled his coffee. My sister actually clapped. And my uncle leaned back in his chair and said, "Well, Danny always did get grandma's junk." The funny thing, none of them knew they were about to lose everything. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. And let me ask you something. Have you ever been treated like this by your own family? Because what happened to me started with a rusty farm nobody wanted, and ended with lawyers, helicopters, million-dollar contracts, and relatives begging me for forgiveness. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the day Grandma Aliner died. Grandma Aliner Mercer passed away on a rainy Tuesday morning in western Pennsylvania. She was 87 years old, strong as oak, sharp as a razor, and the only person in my family who ever truly saw me. The funeral was packed. People came from 3 counties away: farmers, church members, old friends, veterans, people whose names I didn't even know. They stood in line for hours just to tell stories about her. Meanwhile, my family was already talking about the inheritance. I wish I was exaggerating. The funeral luncheon hadn't even started before my brother Mark was discussing property values. My sister Jennifer kept asking whether Grandma still owned the investment accounts. Uncle Rick was openly calculating acreage. I stood in the corner holding a paper plate and listening, the same way I'd listened my entire life. You see, I was the oldest grandchild, the responsible one, the dependable one, which sounds nice until you realize it usually means you're the one everybody uses. For 15 years, I helped Grandma run her farm. Not because I had to, because I wanted to, every weekend, every holiday, every vacation day, while Mark spent his weekends golfing, while Jennifer posted vacation photos from Cancun. While Uncle Rick only visited when he needed money, I repaired fences, maintained tractors, handled paperwork, drove Grandma to doctor's appointments, paid bills when crops failed, fixed roofs after storms. I never kept track. Grandma always told me I should. "People remember what you owe them, Danny," she'd say. "They forget what you gave." I never listened. That was my mistake. The farm sat on nearly 200 acres outside Brookfield, old land. Rolling hills, creeks, woods, fields, nothing special. At least that's what everyone believed. The farmhouse itself looked like it belonged in another century. Peeling paint, rusty equipment, sagging barns. Every time family members visited, they mocked it. Mark called it the world's biggest junkyard. Jennifer called it Grandma's Museum of Broken Things. But Grandma loved every inch of it, and so did I. The day before she died, I sat beside her hospital bed. Machines beeped softly around us. Rain tapped against the window. She looked tired, smaller than I'd ever seen her, yet her eyes remained bright. "Danny," her voice barely rose above a whisper. "I'm here." She squeezed my hand. "Don't let them scare you." I smiled. "Who's going to scare me?" A weak laugh escaped her. "The same people who always do." I thought she was talking about family arguments, property disputes, the usual nonsense. I had no idea what she actually meant. Then she said something I'll never forget. "The farm isn't what they think it is." I frowned. "What does that mean?" Grandma smiled. The mysterious smile she'd worn my entire life whenever she knew something nobody else did. "You'll find out." Those were the last words she ever said to me. 3 days later, the family gathered at Attorney Harold Whitman's office. And that's where everything started. The room smelled like coffee and old books. Rain drummed against the windows. Everyone wore black. Everyone looked sad, at least on the surface. Underneath, they looked excited, because they thought payday had arrived. Harold opened the file, adjusted his glasses, and began reading. Small gifts first: jewelry, furniture, savings accounts, investment funds, cash. Each item triggered smiles around the room. Then came the farm. Harold cleared his throat. "The Mercer family farm and all associated structures are hereby left entirely to my grandson, Daniel Mercer." Silence, then laughter, real laughter. Mark slapped the table. Jennifer nearly choked. Even Uncle Rick grinned. Because to them, Grandma had left me 200 acres of problems. Taxes, repairs, rust, debt, responsibilities. They thought she'd given them the money and dumped the burden on me. Harold wasn't finished, but nobody noticed. Because they were too busy celebrating. And that was the moment my family unknowingly began the worst mistake of their lives. 3 months later, the state government, a mining corporation, and several federal agencies would all be fighting over something buried beneath that worthless farm. Something Grandma had known about for years. Something worth more money than my family had ever imagined. And I was about to discover it. The laughter lasted longer than it should have. I sat there while my brother Mark wiped tears from his eyes. "Oh man," he said. "Danny got the farm." Jennifer shook her head. "Grandma really loved giving people chores. Even Uncle Rick joined in. Congratulations, you inherited a full-time headache. Nobody defended me. Nobody even pretended to. Attorney Harold Whitman remained silent, watching everyone carefully. Then he cleared his throat. There is one additional clause. The room quieted. Mark leaned forward. Jennifer stopped smiling. Harold adjusted his glasses. Daniel Mercer is granted sole authority over all decisions regarding the farm property. The property may not be subdivided, sold, leased, transferred, or developed without his written approval. Silence. A different kind this time. Mark frowned. What does that mean? It means exactly what it says, Harold replied. Jennifer's expression changed immediately. What if the family wants to sell? Harold looked directly at her. The family does not own the property. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. For the first time, nobody was laughing. That afternoon, my phone started ringing. First Mark, then Jennifer, then Uncle Rick. Funny how quickly people become interested in something they called worthless. Mark invited me to dinner. Jennifer wanted coffee. Rick suggested a family discussion. I declined all of them. For the next 2 weeks, the pressure intensified. Every conversation centered around one thing: selling. Mark claimed the farm was costing money. Jennifer argued Grandma would have wanted everyone to benefit. Rick talked endlessly about family unity. Then came the appraisal. A local realtor valued the entire property at around $850,000. Not small money, but split between everyone, it wasn't life-changing. That number became their obsession. One Sunday afternoon, they cornered me at my parents' house. Mark slid paperwork across the kitchen table. Just sign. I glanced down. Purchase agreement, developer, housing subdivision, $890,000. Jennifer smiled. Everybody wins. I pushed the papers back. No, the room froze. No, Mark repeated. No, why? Because Grandma trusted me. Because she specifically made sure nobody could force a sale. Because something about this whole situation felt wrong. But I only said one thing. I'm keeping it. Dad sighed. Mom looked disappointed. Jennifer rolled her eyes. Mark slammed his hand against the table. You're being selfish. That word hit me harder than it should have. Selfish. The man who spent 15 years helping Grandma. The man who never asked for anything. The man everyone called whenever they needed help. Selfish. I stood. I'm leaving. Jennifer laughed. Have fun living on your junk farm. The rest of the family joined in. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to remind me exactly where I stood. I drove away without another word. What I didn't know was that my family had already started making plans behind my back. Plans that depended on me selling. Plans that were about to collapse. And that's when things became dangerous. 3 weeks later, I was repairing a fence line near the north edge of the property. An old pickup truck rolled up the dirt road. The driver was a gray-haired man wearing a state geological survey jacket. He climbed out carrying maps. You Daniel Mercer? Depends who's asking. He laughed. Tom Reynolds, State Geological Survey. That got my attention. What can I do for you? He looked around, then lowered his voice. I've been trying to reach your grandmother for months. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. About what? He unfolded a map across the hood of his truck. Colored lines covered the paper. Markers, coordinates, survey notes. Then he pointed at my property, my exact property. Do you know what's under this land? No, Tom stared at me. Apparently neither does your family. The way he said it made my pulse quicken. What are you talking about? Tom looked around again, making sure nobody was nearby. Then he pointed to a highlighted section. Rare earth mineral deposits. I blinked. What? Massive ones. For a moment I thought he was joking. He wasn't. Rare earth minerals, the materials used in electric vehicles, defense systems, smartphones, wind turbines. Advanced electronics. Industries were desperate for them. The government was desperate for them. And according to preliminary surveys, the largest deposit discovered in Pennsylvania in decades sat directly beneath Grandma's farm. I couldn't speak. Tom continued. The estimate is still preliminary. How much? He hesitated, then said the number. I almost dropped the map. Over $200 million. The world seemed to stop moving. Wind rustled through the trees. Birds chirped somewhere in the distance. But all I could hear was that number, 200 million. Suddenly Grandma's final words made sense. The farm isn't what they think it is. Tom folded the map. There's more? Of course there was. There always is. A week before Grandma died, 3 companies approached her. Mining companies, energy corporations, investment groups, all offering to buy the property. Grandma refused everyone. Then he handed me a folder. Inside were letters, offers, contracts, and one document that made my blood run cold. A purchase agreement, prepared before Grandma died, prepared by a company I'd never heard of. But the listed representative made my stomach drop. Mark Mercer, my brother. I read it twice, 3 times. Mark had been negotiating behind Grandma's back, trying to secure rights to land he didn't own. Land he assumed he'd eventually inherit. I looked up. How long has this been going on? Tom shook his head. At least a year, while pretending the farm was worthless, while mocking it, while pressuring me to sell. Mark had known. Not everything, but enough. And suddenly his behavior made perfect sense. The pressure, the urgency, the anger. He wasn't trying to help the family. He was trying to control the payday. I drove home in silence. That night I called attorney Harold Whitman. His reaction was immediate. Daniel, his voice became serious. Don't sign anything. I wasn't planning to. No, you don't understand. He paused, then said words that changed everything. Someone already tried. The next morning I sat in Harold's office. A thick file rested on his desk. He opened it, slowly, carefully, and slid several documents toward me. At first glance they looked ordinary, then I saw my name. Daniel Mercer, signature included, except it wasn't my signature. It was a forgery, a surprisingly good one, but still fake. Harold leaned back. 3 weeks ago someone submitted documents attempting to authorize exploratory access to your property. I stared at him. What? The request was denied because the paperwork failed verification. My pulse hammered. Who submitted it? Harold turned another page. There it was, Mark Mercer, my own brother. For several seconds I couldn't breathe. Not because I was angry, because I was disappointed, deeply disappointed. Grandma had trusted me, and Mark had tried stealing the farm before her body was cold. Harold folded his hands. What do you want to do? I thought about it, long and hard. Then I remembered Grandma, her warning. People remember what you owe them. They forget what you gave. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to post on social media. I was going to protect myself, quietly, professionally, legally. Over the next month I assembled a team, lawyers, geologists, accountants, industry consultants. Every meeting happened behind closed doors. Every document remained confidential. Meanwhile, my family kept calling, demanding updates, demanding meetings, demanding access. I gave them nothing. Then came the first offer. A mining company offered $42 million for partial development rights. I declined. The second offered $58 million. I declined again. The third offer came from a consortium working with federal contractors. Their number made everyone in the room sit up. The negotiations continued, and all the while my family had no idea. They still believed I was stubbornly clinging to a worthless farm. Then Mark made one final mistake. He showed up unannounced, 3 trucks, 2 surveyors, a lawyer, and paperwork he had absolutely no right to possess. He walked onto my property like he owned it. I watched from the farmhouse porch. Calm, silent, waiting, Mark smiled. Ready to be reasonable, I looked at him, then at the survey crew, then at the lawyer, and finally back at my brother. No, his smile vanished. For the first time I saw fear, not much, just enough, because somewhere deep down, he was beginning to realize Grandma hadn't left me a burden. She'd left me the key to everything, and the collapse of my family's plans was only beginning. Mark stood in my driveway holding papers he had no right to use. The surveyors looked uncomfortable. The lawyer looked confused. I simply crossed my arms. You need to leave, Mark laughed. Or what? I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out my phone and made a call. 30 seconds later, attorney Harold Whitman answered. Daniel, put it on speaker. Harold understood immediately. Mr. Mercer, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, have the individuals currently trespassing been informed that legal proceedings have already begun? Mark's face changed. What legal proceedings? Harold continued. The forgery investigation, the attempted mineral rights fraud, and the pending civil action. The surveyors exchanged nervous glances. The lawyer's eyes widened. Forgery? One of the surveyors asked. I watched Mark carefully. For the first time in months, he looked uncertain. The lawyer stepped closer. Mark, what is he talking about? Mark stammered. It's a misunderstanding. Harold's voice remained calm. The state attorney's office may disagree. Silence. Then the surveyors quietly packed their equipment. The lawyer gathered his briefcase. Within 10 minutes, everybody except Mark had left. He stood there alone in the driveway, angry, embarrassed. Exposed, you really want to do this? He asked. I looked at him. No, that surprised him. What? I never wanted any of this. Then I turned and walked back into the farmhouse. I left him standing there. 3 days later, the first legal notices arrived. Then everything exploded. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected, far faster, because the mineral deposit had attracted attention from places my family couldn't imagine. State agencies, federal regulators, energy companies, mining corporations, investment groups, people with resources, people with lawyers, people who took fraud very seriously. The forged paperwork connected directly to Mark. The attempted access agreements connected directly to Mark. Emails surfaced, contracts surfaced, bank records surfaced, and once investigators started looking, they kept finding more, much more. By the end of the month, they discovered Mark had already accepted advance payments from investors. nearly $750,000. Money based on promises he didn't legally have the authority to make. Money he spent. Money he couldn't return. The investors were furious. The lawsuits arrived immediately. Jennifer wasn't spared either. It turned out she'd been quietly approaching real estate developers, promising them future access to the property. Collecting consulting fees, selling information, making deals. None of it legal, none of it authorized. The developers wanted their money back. My phone started ringing constantly. Mark, Jennifer, Mom, Dad, Uncle Rick. Ignored, ignored, ignored. Then came the moment everything truly collapsed. The bank froze Mark's business accounts. His construction company depended on cash flow. Without access to funds, projects stalled. Employees quit. Subcontractors filed claims. Within 6 weeks, the company was effectively dead. Jennifer's real estate license was suspended pending investigation. Her income vanished overnight. Uncle Rick wasn't charged with anything. But investors discovered he'd helped introduce several deals. They sued him anyway, one by one. Everyone who laughed in that lawyer's office was now sitting across from attorneys of their own. The family group chat went silent, then hostile, then silent again, and through all of it, I never said a word. I simply watched, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't cleaning up someone else's mess. Then came the offer, the real offer, the one that changed everything. A consortium of mining and technology companies submitted a proposal valued at over $180 million, not for ownership, for development rights, royalties, long-term revenue sharing, environmental protections. Everything Grandma would have wanted. I spent weeks reviewing it, months actually, lawyers, geologists, financial advisors, every detail examined. When the agreement was finally signed, the announcement made national news: the forgotten farm. The hidden mineral deposit, the small Pennsylvania property suddenly worth a fortune. My family learned about it the same way everyone else did, on television, and that was when the begging began. The meeting happened 9 months after Grandma's funeral, 9 months after the laughter, 9 months after the betrayal. Harold arranged it at his office. I almost declined. Then I remembered Grandma. Closure matters, so I went. The conference room looked exactly the same. Same table, same chairs, same windows, but the people inside were different. Life had changed them. Mark looked older. Jennifer looked exhausted. Dad seemed smaller. Mom avoided eye contact. Nobody laughed this time. Nobody smiled. I took my seat. The room remained silent. Finally, Mom spoke. Her voice trembled. We made mistakes. Mistakes. Interesting word. Jennifer started crying. We didn't know. I said nothing. Mark stared at the table, then finally looked up. I was wrong. The room froze. Mark never admitted fault, ever, yet here he was defeated, broken. I thought I deserved it, he said quietly. The farm, the money, the opportunity, he laughed bitterly. I convinced myself of that. Nobody spoke. For several moments all I heard was the hum of the air conditioner. Then Dad cleared his throat. Can we fix this? I looked around the room, at the people who spent years taking, years mocking, years expecting me to sacrifice, and suddenly I felt something unexpected. Not anger, not satisfaction, relief. Because I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need apologies. I didn't need explanations. I simply needed peace. I stood. Everyone watched, waiting, hoping. Then I gave them the only answer I had. The answer Grandma taught me long ago. The farm made me rich. I paused. But losing your approval made me free. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I picked up my coat, walked toward the door, and never looked back. That was the last time I saw most of them. 2 years later, life looks very different. The farm is still standing. The old house is renovated. The barns are restored. The creek still runs through the property exactly as it did when Grandma walked those fields. I kept my promise. I protected what she loved. The development project created hundreds of local jobs. The community benefited. Schools received funding. Roads improved. Scholarship programs were established in Grandma Alina Mercer's name. The farm became part of her legacy, not just mine. As for my family, Mark eventually filed bankruptcy. Jennifer moved out of state and started over. Uncle Rick settled several lawsuits and disappeared from everyone's radar. Mom and Dad still live in the same house. We exchange holiday cards, nothing more, and honestly, that's enough. People often ask whether I regret any of it, whether I wish things had ended differently. The answer is complicated. I wish they had loved me more. I wish they had respected me sooner. I wish they hadn't needed to lose everything before understanding what they had, but I don't regret standing up for myself. Not anymore, because Grandma was right. People remember what you owe them. They forget what you gave. Until one day, you stop giving, and that's when they finally understand your value. The funny thing is, the greatest thing buried beneath that farm wasn't worth millions of dollars. It wasn't rare earth minerals. It wasn't contracts. It wasn't royalties. It wasn't wealth. It was a lesson that took me 43 years to learn. Never let people convince you that your kindness is your obligation, because the moment kindness becomes expected, it stops being appreciated, and sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is quietly walk away. They laughed when Grandma left me the rusty farm. 3 months later, they never saw it coming.